In this video, a homeowner association president started raging when I refused to let her park on my private property. She insisted that I must obey her orders despite not being an HOA member. Welcome back to Ripe Stories. So let me start by saying that I am a car enthusiast. I own a restored 1969 Mustang Boss 429 that I've put countless hours and money into maintaining. When my wife and I bought our house 3 years ago, one of the main selling points was that it came with a dedicated covered parking spot that was not part of the HOA's jurisdiction. I pay good money to rent this spot specifically to keep my classic car protected. I installed security cameras around the spot and always keep the car covered when it's not in use. This detail becomes important later. Enter Martha, our HOA president. Picture the stereotypical Karen with an extra helping of entitlement. She's been running the HOA with an iron fist for the past 5 years, and most neighbors just try to stay out of her way. I've been lucky since my property is not under HOA control, but I've heard plenty of horror stories. The real drama started last weekend. So Martha decided to host some massive family reunion at her house. By Saturday morning, her relatives had taken up every available parking spot on our street. I'm talking about 20 plus cars parked everywhere, blocking driveways, taking up both sides of the street, some even partially on sidewalks. The whole neighborhood looked like a used car lot. I was coming back from a car show around 2 p.m. when I saw Martha's massive SUV parked in my private spot. My covered spot, the spot I specifically pay for. She had just moved my car cover and left it crumpled on the ground. I pulled up behind her SUV, blocking it in, and called the property management company that handles my spot rental. While I was on the phone, Martha came storming out of her house. "You need to move your car right now," she demanded, walking up to my window. "I have nowhere else to park with all my family here." I rolled down my window and said, "This is my private parking spot, Martha. I pay for it monthly." She scoffed. "Oh please, you're being ridiculous. You can park on the street for 1 day. I'm the HOA president and I'm telling you to move your car." "This spot is not part of the HOA," I explained calmly. "You know that. Please move your SUV so I can park my car." Her face turned red. "Listen here, young man. I have important family visitings and I need this spot. Your little toy car can sit on the street for 1 afternoon. Now move your car before I have it towed." At this point, I could not help but laugh. "Martha, you cannot have my car towed from behind your illegally parked vehicle." Just so we understand each other, this is my private property. I'm gonna ask one more time. Please move your SUV. "How dare you disrespect me like this?" she shrieked. "I run this neighborhood. You cannot talk to me this way." By now, a few of her family members had wandered over to see what the commotion was all about. One particularly large guy, who I would later learn was her brother-in-law, stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, trying to look intimidating. "No problem at all," I replied. "But your sister-in-law just parked in my private spot without permission and I would like her to move her car." "Listen here, buddy," he started, but I cut him off. "No, you listen. This is my property. I pay for this spot. It's not part of your family reunion parking lot. Now either Martha moves her car or I will have it towed." That set Martha off. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. "Fine, I'm calling the police. We will see what they have to say about you harassing me and threatening my family." I shrugged and leaned back in my car, sending a quick text to my wife to let her know what was happening here. I also started my dashcam recording, just in case. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. And by this time, Martha had worked herself into quite a state, telling anyone who would listen about how I was threatening her and trying to ruin her family reunion. The first officer, a middle-aged guy named Officer Brown, approached my car while his partner talked to Martha. "What's going on here, sir?" I explained the situation calmly, showing him my rental agreement for the parking spot and pointing out my security cameras. Officer Brown nodded and walked over to talk with his partner. I could not hear everything, but I definitely caught Martha's voice rising. "I don't care about this rental agreement. I'm the HOA president and he needs to respect my authority." The officers pulled Martha aside for a moment and I could see her face getting redder and redder as they talked to her. Finally, Officer Brown came back to my car. "Sir, we've explained that this is a civil matter and that she is parked illegally on private property. We've asked her to move her vehicle." Martha then stormed over. "This is ridiculous. I want him arrested for harassment." Officer Brown turned to her. "Ma'am, you're the one who could be charged here. You are actually trespassing on private property and—" he paused, looking at something behind my car. "Your SUV is partially blocking a fire hydrant, by the way." I had not even noticed that detail, but sure enough, the back end of her SUV was blocking the hydrant next to my parking spot. "That is a $500 fine and an automatic tow," Officer Brown's partner added. "You cannot be serious," Martha exploded. "Do you know who I am? I run this neighborhood. I demand to speak to your supervisor." Officer Brown just sighed. "Ma'am, I'm calling for a tow truck. You can either move your vehicle now or it will be towed at your expense. Your choice." "This is outrageous." Martha turned to the small crowd that had gathered. "Are you all seeing this? This is abuse of power." The irony of her statement was not lost on anyone. Several neighbors were poorly hiding their smirks. One of them, Tom from across the street, spoke up. "Actually, Martha, we're seeing plenty of abuse of power, but not from the police." Martha's face went from red to purple. She fumbled in her purse for her keys, all the while muttering threats about HOA violations and how I would regret this. As she climbed into her SUV, she jabbed a finger at me. "This is not over. Just wait until the next HOA board meeting." I could not resist. "Martha, I've told you before, my property is not under HOA jurisdiction, but please feel free to discuss it at your meeting." She slammed her SUV into reverse, nearly hitting her brother-in-law in the process, and peeled out of my spot. The police wrote her a ticket for the fire hydrant violation before she could escape, which led to another tirade about harassment and discrimination. After she left, Officer Brown turned to me. "You might want to keep those security cameras running for a while. People like that tend to hold grudges." I thanked the officers for their help and finally parked my car in its rightful spot. As I was putting the cover back on, several neighbors came over to congratulate me. "That was amazing," Sarah from next door said. "Nobody's ever stood up to her like that." "Well, she picked the wrong parking spot," I replied. And well, the aftermath was interesting. That evening, Martha's family's car started mysteriously accumulating parking tickets. It turns out that someone, not me, had called the city about vehicles blocking sidewalks and driveways, and the family reunion broke up pretty quickly after that. The next day, I got an email from Martha demanding that I pay her ticket since it was supposedly my fault she had to park there. I did not even bother responding. Instead, I forwarded it to the property management company to keep on record just in case. A week later, I heard through the grapevine that Martha tried to bring up my disrespectful behavior at the HOA meeting, only to be shut down by the board's lawyer, who reminded her, again, that my property is not under their jurisdiction. But well, here is where I might be the a-hole. I could have just parked on the street for one afternoon, truth be told. Some neighbors have said that I was being petty and inflexible and that I should have shown some compassion given the special occasion. My wife, while supporting me, suggested I could have handled it more diplomatically. So Reddit, am I the jerk for refusing to let the HOA president use my parking spot and watch her get a ticket? And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Would you say that OP was being a jerk here? I would 100% disagree with that. Why would you ever let anyone, let alone an entitled HOA person, park on your private spot, especially when they act this entitled? You should not reward this kind of behavior, honestly. Then again though, maybe you have a different opinion. I would love to hear about it. To answer some common questions, yes, I have documentation that my property is not part of the HOA, the car cover was not damaged, just dirty from being thrown on the ground, and my security cameras caught her moving the cover, so I have that on video. Several neighbors thanked me privately for standing up to her too. Quick update to the story, Martha sent a formal letter apologizing for the incident, but only after the HOA board forced her to do it. It was the most passive-aggressive apology I've ever read, but I will take it. Comment number 1 said, "Not the a-hole, she literally trespassed on your property and then tried to use her HOA position to bully you. Her being the HOA president does not give her the right to take whatever she wants." Comment number 2, "Not the a-hole, this is the perfect example of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. She could have asked nicely or, planned better parking for her massive family gathering." Comment number 3, "Not the a-hole. I run this neighborhood" is all I needed to hear. People like this need to learn that they don't actually own everything they see. And we have another update to the story that goes like this. Hey everyone, it's been about 3 months since my original post and a lot has happened. I thought you all might want to know how this played out, especially since many of you messaged me asking for updates. First off, thank you for all the support and advice on my original post. You were right, I was not the a-hole and just standing my ground was the right thing to do. Here's what happened since then though. After my original post, Martha started what I can only describe as a campaign of harassment. It began with little things. She would park her family's car right at the edge of my driveway, technically legal but obviously meant to annoy me, and she would stand in her front yard taking pictures every time I moved my car. I documented everything and kept my security cameras running 24/7. Good thing too, because things escalated quickly. About a week after the parking incident, I came home to find my car cover had been slashed. My security cameras caught the whole thing. Martha's teenage son did it, but here's the kicker, the footage clearly showed Martha watching from her porch and nodding in approval. I called the police immediately and filed a report. When they questioned Martha, she claimed that her son was just playing and that I was being dramatic about an old car cover. The officer was not impressed, especially when I showed him the footage. Ma'am, Officer Brown, the same one from before, said, encouraging your minor son to vandalize property is a serious offense. You're lucky the owner is only asking for the cost of the cover. Martha then exploded and said, he is lying. That cover was already damaged. He's just trying to extort money from me. Well, unfortunately for her, I had photos of the cover from that morning when I left for work showing it was in perfect condition. The police gave her a choice, pay for the replacement cover, $300, or face criminal charges for mischief and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. She wrote the check on the spot, all the while telling anyone who would listen that I was persecuting her family, but it didn't stop there. The next week, someone called code enforcement on me, claiming I was running an illegal auto repair business from my home. I wasn't, I just like working on my car. The inspector took one look at my single car setup and apologized for wasting my time. When I mentioned Martha's recent behavior, he just shook his head and said I was not the first person she had targeted. Well, that is when my neighbor Tom came over with some interesting information. It turns out that Martha had been abusing her position as HOA president for years. She had been selectively enforcing rules, waiving fees for friends, while harshly penalizing people she did not like, and even using HOA funds to pay for her personal landscaping. Honestly, we've never had enough proof to do anything about it, Tom explained. She is really careful about covering her tracks. But now she is getting sloppy because she is angry at you, so I decided to do some digging. Since my property is not part of the HOA, I could not file official complaints, but I could help my neighbors gather evidence. Tom introduced me to Sarah, who used to be on the HOA board until Martha forced her out. Sarah had kept detailed records of everything. I have copies of every questionable decision she has made in the past 3 years, Sarah told me, pulling out a thick folder, including emails where she admitted to using HOA funds for her personal garden renovation. I was saving them for the right moment. This was way bigger than a parking dispute now. Sarah, Tom and I spent the next week compiling everything. And seriously, the evidence was damning. Emails showing that Martha had waived over $20,000 in HOA fees for her friends while aggressively pursuing smaller violations from others. Bank statements proving she had used HOA funds for personal expenses, including her daughter's graduation party. Documentation of selective rule enforcement, particularly against elderly residents who could not even fight back. Also records of her hiring her brother's company for HOA maintenance at inflated prices without board approval. We took everything to Lisa, a homeowner who happened to be a real estate attorney. After reviewing the documents, she practically grinned. This is textbook HOA board member misconduct, Lisa explained. The personal use of HOA funds alone is enough to remove her, but the selective enforcement and unauthorized contracts make it even better. We need to call an emergency board meeting. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood and the community center was packed. I sat in the back with Tom and Sarah, watching it unfold. Martha strutted in like she owned the place, but her smile faded when she saw Lisa standing at the podium with a projector set up. "What is this about?" Martha demanded. "This meeting was not properly noticed." "Well, actually," Lisa replied, pulling out a copy of the HOA bylaws, "when 3 or more board members call for an emergency meeting regarding misconduct, only 48 hours notice is required, and we gave 72. For the next hour, Lisa methodically presented everything we had found. The room got quieter and quieter as each piece of evidence was shown. Emails appeared on the screen in Martha's own words, bank statements showed clear misuse of funds, and photos documented the selective enforcement. Martha tried to interrupt several times, but Lisa shut her down and said, "You will have your chance to respond, but right now, the board is presenting evidence of misconduct." When Lisa finished, Martha jumped up. "This is a witch hunt. That parking spot guy put you up to this because he has a vendetta against me. None of this is true." "The bank statements are not true?" Lisa asked calmly. "The emails from your account are not true? Your signature on these contracts is not true?" Well, those were approved expenses. Everyone knew about them." "Really?" Sarah stood up. "Because I was the HOA treasurer when you approved the $15,000 landscaping project that somehow ended up in your backyard and the board never voted on it." The meeting devolved into chaos as more neighbors stood up to share their stories. One elderly resident tearfully described how Martha had threatened to put a lien on her house over unapproved window boxes, while Martha's friends had built entire unauthorized decks without consequences. Then finally, the board called for a vote. It was unanimous. Martha was immediately removed as HOA president, and the board would pursue legal action to recover misused funds. "You cannot do this to me," Martha screamed as she was asked to leave. "I have run this neighborhood for 5 years. You will regret this." "Well, actually," Lisa interjected, "we have already contacted the police about the financial misappropriation. I would suggest you get a lawyer." The following weeks were intense. The police investigation revealed even more than we had found. Martha had been skimming from HOA funds for years, totaling over $50,000. She was arrested 2 days later for embezzlement and fraud. The local news picked up the story, and other HOA boards in the area started doing their own internal audits. It turns out Martha's behavior was not as unique as we had hoped. 3 other HOA presidents in nearby neighborhoods were also found to be misusing funds. Last week, Martha took a plea deal. She has to pay back everything she stole, plus she is banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. She is also on probation for 3 years. Her family is trying to sell their house. Apparently, living in the neighborhood has become uncomfortable for them. The new HOA board, though, is amazing. The best of all, they've started treating everyone fairly. Oh, and remember Martha's son who slashed my car cover? Part of Martha's plea deal included paying for a new premium car cover, $500, and a full professional detail for my Mustang, $800. The judge was apparently a car enthusiast himself and was not happy about the vandalism. Tom was elected as the new HOA president, and his first act was to create an oversight committee to prevent future abuses. The neighbor who originally said I was being petty about the parking spot actually apologized to me last week and said, "If you had not stood up to her, we might never have caught what she was doing." My wife framed the receipt for Martha's parking ticket and hung it in our garage. She says it's a reminder that sometimes standing your ground is not just about one parking spot, it's about refusing to let bullies get away with bad behavior. Final thoughts: when I first posted here, I was worried about being the a-hole for not letting someone use my parking spot for one afternoon. Now I realize, though, that giving in to entitled behavior only encourages more of it. Sometimes the smallest stand against injustice can lead to bigger changes. Before we end the video, I will read a few last stories from r/ask Reddit about HOAs that you have not heard before, I guarantee. So this person writes, "I'm not a homeowner, but I work for a company that manages them. Apparently, in southern states that's not mine, trees are valuable." Okay, sure, I get it. However, one homeowner claims that 2 trees and their roots in her front yard, each lot has 2 trees, are growing into her plumbing pipes and breaking them. She has spent like thousands of dollars fixing her foundation alone. I inquired about the association during the process. Both of us came to an agreement that she could remove the trees and just plant them somewhere else. They would still be in the front yard, but just not on some water lines. I let the association know it was reasonable, and I had been through this with dozens of associations before. Your property is more important than some aesthetics. But they of course were like, oh hell no. The association straight up told me no. She can remove 1 tree, but she has to pay to replant. That's actually really typical, but she will not remove the other one. I tried to explain that this woman cannot keep fixing her pipes, but they straight told me that moving into the place meant she accepted the plumbing issues. That is not disclosed anywhere in any resale certificate or documents. I've never heard of such a demand. I had to call her back and tell her what the association said. She said she's definitely gonna sue, and it baffles me that there's no reason for it. There's bad HOAs and then there's some with no common sense. Last I heard, she won the lawsuit, and the HOA had to pay her a bunch of money. So yes, it can be profitable to stand up against an HOA. Another person wrote, my parents bought a house in a now HOA neighborhood, but they were one of the first residents in the neighborhood. When they first moved in, there were no other houses around them. Now it is a full neighborhood. My dad built a really nice patio out back with a pergola a few summers ago, and a week later one of the neighbors came over whom my dad had never met and told him that it violated the HOA bylaws. My dad basically told him to go pound sand. My dad is a carpenter and the patio/pergola looks great, not trashy or makeshift in any way. The neighbor was just being a nosy HOA douchebag with nothing better to do. Nothing more came of it either, no fines, no letters, nothing. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you again tomorrow.